Am I on? Okay. Hey, all right. Hey, welcome everybody. It is 5:03, so we are behind schedule already. So I'm glad you're here tonight. We are here for the Because We Care training. Whether you are already approved or you're newly seeking to be approved, it is good that you're here. We have made some updates and adjustments to our policy and procedure manual, so that's why this training is required again, even if you were approved in the past. We need you to go through this again to be able to continue to work. So I'm not on? It sounds like I'm on. All right. Keep the heckling to a minimum in the front row, please. All right. Because this is being recorded for future training purposes. So hopefully everybody has their version of the handout. Essentially, we'll just be reading through the manual with some extra comments and discussion. If you have questions, I'll stop at periodic moments to ask for questions, so try to hold them until then. Rather than passing a mic, I'll just try to repeat the question for the recording and then answer the question. Joelle will be up here as well to assist with that. There are also some clipboards going around. Please sign in for that. That way we can verify you were here and have redone the training and can maintain your approved status. So let's go ahead and open with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and this evening where we can gather together yet again. We thank you for the start of spring, the beautiful weather outside, and the ways that we could enjoy it. And God, we thank you for our children. We thank you for the ministries and the programs that we have here at Anchor to minister to our children, to teach them the gospel, to introduce them to you and their truths. We thank you that you have entrusted them to us and given us a stewardship, and that's why we are here, Lord, because we want to rightly think about how we handle such matters and protect our children in the ministries that we have. And we give this time to you. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so go ahead and just open up your manual. First page that's not numbered is your table of contents. So you can go ahead and go right past that, and we'll go to page 1. And so like I said, I'm basically just going to read through this, so follow along with it. There might be some parts I'll skip or whatever, but that's essentially what we're going to do tonight. So why do we need a child protection program? Well, because God created children, and He loves children, and Jesus demonstrated that children are valuable and should be protected. So there are two categories of reasons that we'll look at, and we'll start where we should always start, with biblical reasons. And so first, we see that Jesus welcomes and values children. Two verses there taken from the Gospels, Mark chapter 10, 13 through 16. And they were bringing children to him that he might touch them, and the disciples rebuked them. But when Jesus saw it, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the children come to me, do not hinder them, for to such belong the kingdom of God. And truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it." And he took them in his arms and blessed them, laying his hands on them. And then Matthew 18, verse 5, "Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me." So these two familiar passages demonstrate that Jesus valued children, and he told us to welcome them. And so when we follow Christ's example and welcome children, we are in essence welcoming Jesus himself. However, Jesus warns against harming children. So it says here, Jesus highlighted not only the faith and openness of children, but also the vulnerability of children. And he warned those who prey upon that vulnerability. So that same text in Matthew, the next verse, so Matthew 18, verse 6, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea." So if our church, if we here as Anchor Baptist Church, hope to effectively welcome children, we must also protect them from those who would seek to do them harm. So the second category of reasons of why we need this program are cultural reasons. The first one of those would be our culture presents a risk to the children of Anchor Baptist Church. So it's the unfortunate reality of living in a fallen world, but we need to consider these things as our existence is tainted by sin. So there are child abusers who actively seek to harm or exploit children. And so churches, and we here at Anchor as well, are vulnerable because we have many programs to serve children, and we're constantly looking for volunteers. And in general, we have a tendency to have an environment of trust. So the second part of this is our culture presents a risk to the workers of the church. There is the risk of unfounded accusations that could be played out with widespread media attention. And I don't think any one of you would like to be involved with that, so that's why you're here, to be informed and be prepared. The third cultural reason is our culture presents a risk to the church itself. So litigation resulting from incidents of child abuse. A church can be held liable for negligent hiring as well as volunteer staffing, negligent supervision, or negligent retention of someone who is known to be a danger to children. So this is not just hypothetical. There is a well-established history of lawsuits against churches in these matters, and we sure hope to avoid them. So there are the three cultural reasons why we have this program. So what should our program seek to accomplish? Well, in the bold letters there it says we are seeking to reduce the risk of abuse or injury to children and teens here at Anchor Baptist Church. And so there are simple measures that can be taken to significantly reduce the possibility of abuse ever occurring within our church. So this program was designed specifically for that purpose. So this protection program was designed to accomplish the following three objectives. So first, to protect our children and teens by screening individuals who volunteer to serve, providing adequate supervision to ministries and activities, and then educating our workers about the prevention of abuse. So again, you're here to receive part of that education. Second, we are seeking to protect our workers from false allegations of abuse by educating them about how to avoid situations that invite suspicion. Also by educating them concerning appropriate and inappropriate behaviors with children. The third thing we're seeking to do is to protect and strengthen our church and its ministry by reducing our legal risk and liability in providing reasonable care for our children, establishing appropriate responses to alleged, reported, or even suspected incidences of abuse. And last, designing a program that protects our ministries but does not hinder their effectiveness. So we still want to, of course, be effective in our ministry with our children. So there you can see a number of the resources that were utilized to put this policy manual together. And so you could look up any of those resources yourself if you're interested to be even more informed and educated on these matters. But those are the sources that we use, so we wanted to rightly source those. All right, so page 3. What is child abuse? So in the state of Iowa, child abuse occurs when a child is subjected to one or more of 11 categories of child abuse. And so they are in the Iowa Code, and you can see the section number there. So these categories are as follows: physical abuse, mental injury, denial of critical care, otherwise known as neglect, sexual abuse, prostitution of a child, presence of illegal drugs or other dangerous substances, bestiality in the presence of a minor, allowing access by a registered sex offender, and allowing access to obscene material or child sex trafficking. So we'll now look at the first 4 of these categories more closely, and they kind of encompass all 11 in one degree or another. But so first, I guess they all came up. All right, so then first is physical abuse. These will get a little bit legalese, but I think these were pulled directly out of the code, if I'm right, Joel? Yeah, so they're a little bit legalese, so hopefully it's understandable. But physical abuse then is defined as any non-accidental physical injury or injury which is at variance with the account given of it, suffered by a child as the result of the acts of or the omissions of a person responsible for the care of the child. So I guess the key here is to think that would be intentional harm done by actions taken or by withholding taking action. So physical injury that happens by either an action you take or because you did not take action to prevent injury. So examples could be, include but not limited to bruises, skin redness, fractures, burns, removal of hair, biting, and things of the like. So that's what we're looking out for. That could be within the category of physical abuse. Next category is mental injury. So mental injury is defined as any mental injury to a child's intellectual or psychological capacity as evidenced by an observable and substantial impairment in the child's ability to function within that child's normal range of performance and behavior as the result of the acts or omissions of a person responsible for the care of the child. So same thing, either actions you're taking or your lack of taking action that causes some sort of intellectual or psychological injury to the child. Examples could be ignoring the child and failing to provide necessary mental or intellectual stimulation, or terrorizing a child with verbal assaults or creating a climate of fear. All of these things are very obviously against our Christian faith and belief in the message of the gospel, but nonetheless we need to be aware to be cautious against these kinds of things. Third category is the denial of critical care or neglect. So neglect would be defined as the failure on the part of a person responsible for the care of a child to provide for the adequate food, shelter, clothing, medical or mental health treatment, supervision, or other care necessary. So examples, leaving a child unattended that results in direct harm or increased risk of harm to the child. So either of the types of harm that were previously stated. So again, we're going through this not only so that we don't do these things, but so you have an awareness of, are these things happening to this child by another person, even their own family, perhaps outside of here. So although a lot of these then would not sound like, yeah, that's what might happen here, but to still be aware of these things. So the last category is sexual abuse. Child sexual abuse includes any form of sexual contact, behavior, or activity in which a minor is being used for the sexual stimulation of the perpetrator. Child sexual abuse may be violent or non-violent. All child sexual abuse is an exploitation of a child's vulnerability and powerlessness in which the abuser is fully responsible for their actions. Child sexual abuse is a criminal act. So these examples, not exhaustive, but fairly representative and comprehensive. Subcategories of sexual abuse could be within areas of touching. So aspects of sexual abuse that involve touching may include, and I'll just let you read the rest given the nature of what's listed there and for the purpose of this being recorded, but so there's the categories of things that should not be done in the realm of touching. Non-touching. So there are aspects of sexual abuse that involve non-touching, and they include verbal comments, sexually suggestive remarks or jokes, exposure to pornographic images, obscene phone calls, text messages, or other use of digital media, exhibitionism, or allowing children to witness any sexual activity. And then third category is exploitation. Exploitation is a form of child sexual abuse in which a person takes advantage of a power imbalance to force or entice a child into engaging in sexual activity. And so, as with all forms of child sexual abuse, the presence of actual or perceived consent does not lessen the abusive nature of the act. It makes no difference if the child says they want to be involved with such activity. So, bottom line, perhaps, in the bold and in the box, Anchor Baptist Church forbids the abuse, harassment, coercion, or exploitation of children, teens, or adults in any ministry of Anchor Baptist Church. Those who engage in such behavior will be subject to a disciplinary process that may include legal action. So it is up to you to know what all of these things entail, and thus that's why you're here today. So you are fully responsible for your actions and inactions. So I'll pause at that point. Are there any questions over what we've gone through so far, or anything to clarify? And then maybe I'll defer anything to add from you, Joel, at this point. Okay. All right, well, if you still think of a question from that section, you can ask it later yet, but we'll move on then. So page 5, the selection of workers. So the following policies and guidelines will be followed here at Anchor for reviewing applicants for positions of service within our children and student ministries. So all 5 of these elements will take place, but it's not necessarily sequential. So first, there is a threshold requirement. So volunteers must be either full or fellowship members of Anchor Baptist Church and at least 13 years of age. So in addition, they must have attended Anchor for at least 6 months prior to serving, although exceptions can be made, and it is in accordance with our insurance company's underwriting guidelines. So volunteers must also be 5 years older than the children or students with which they wish to serve. So again, exceptions could be made, but they must be done only with the approval of the pastor and the ministry leader of whichever age group is being considered. So this is a newer part of our policy, and so examples perhaps of an exception could be there's a 22-year-old seminary student from Faith who is interning and wants to help in student ministries, but there are 18-year-old senior in high school within student ministries. There's only a 4-year gap. So an exception could be made in talking with the pastor, with Michael, or whoever might be the student ministry leader at that time, and so that's an example of a type of exception that could be made. This would then disqualify if a senior in high school graduates, remains in the church, really enjoyed student ministries, wants to continue to engage and serve in that capacity. They would not then be allowed to be an assistant within student ministries, having just been a year or two out of that ministry. There's important reasons why you would want to keep some separation there. So that's a newer part of the policy, but that is what we will use from here forward. Second is, I didn't do the first one. Second one, you will have to fill out the volunteer form. So Children and Student Ministries volunteer form. Volunteers must complete and sign a Children and Student Ministries volunteer form and the related waivers giving permission to check references and background information. So this form is confidential and it will be secured in a locked filing cabinet in the church office. The third part of this process is the background and reference checks. So these background checks, including criminal records checks, as well as internet and social media searches, will be made of volunteers at the time of their application. Volunteers must also consent on that form to recurring background checks, as well as internet and social media searches at the discretion of Anchor Baptist Church. So we're not routinely every month going to do this, but if the situation would warrant, there could be recurring checks of such things. Each volunteer must also list at least 2 references that could be contacted for input concerning that volunteer's suitability for working with children and or teens. These references can include other Anchor Baptist Church members, but cannot include relatives. Fourth, there is a training. Volunteers will attend a training. Here you are. Good job. You got that one done. And then fifth, a personal meeting. Volunteers will meet with a ministry staff member. So I think, Joel, there's examples of the volunteer form. I'll have you run through that real quick. Yep. So pay attention to the screen. The forms are just up there. Right. Nope. There you go. Yep. There it is.
Okay, so I do have copies of this. If there's anybody here who has not yet filled one of these out and thinks they want to work in children's ministry, maybe Nate can give you one if you raise your hand. But we're just going to look at them like you said. That first page just shows that it's a confidential form. you were going to ask for some basic information like your name, address, email, social security number, and we need that in order to do the background checks. Sorry, this is me. Should I be doing something different? Okay. All right. And then we ask you where you want to serve. There's a section on driving information that's only filled out if you plan to drive the children somewhere, driving them up to camp or something like that, but that's not something that most people even have to deal with. Then the second page, or third page technically, I guess, we're asking, again, how long you've been at Anchor. We want you to have been here at least 6 months. You need to be a member. We're going to ask how long you've lived in the state of Iowa. Part of that is because we do a fairly thorough background check through the Iowa courts system, but like if you've just moved to Iowa from Minnesota or something, we may choose then to do the Minnesota check instead. Okay? And I just use this like this.
Yeah.
Hey. Okay. And then again, we ask churches you have attended in the past, I think 5 years or something like that. And again, something like that might tip us off if somebody is church hopping, like why are they going from church to church? Are they trying to avoid something? You know, are they running from something? And then we ask for any experience you have with children, just so that we can kind of see maybe what ministry might fit best. And this form has been revamped a little bit too. It used to ask for all experience with children, and for some of you that was like pages and pages that then I didn't do anything with, and it just seemed like kind of busy work. So then at the bottom, you'll see we ask for 2 references with an address. I send them a letter. It's very simple, like, can you recommend that this person work with children? They check the box yes or no, and they can give an explanation. Finally, the last page shows everything kind of that you agree to allow us to do with background checks and all of that. There are also several questions that might preclude you from working with children if you answer yes. If you say that, yes, you've been convicted of a felony involving children, you may not be able to work with children. Not because we don't think that Christ's blood can cover every sin and that you can be a changed person, but just there are some safety measures we have to have in place. And our sin has consequences, and we all know that. So anything that you would answer yes to on this page would be something that you would have to probably discuss with a ministry or pastoral staff, just so that we can make the decision about whether or not you would be allowed to serve with the children. And then you sign it, and you're good to go.
Any questions at this point about that form? Elena?
If we have filled one out in the past, do we need to fill out another one?
Nope. At this point, anybody who's newly seeking to be approved would fill one of these out.
Does that include if I was a minor when I filled it out?
I mean, your parent signed off to give consent for all the background checks to be made. But I don't know.
It's probably a good point. If there's from going from a minor to an adult, that's probably one of those.
That would be one
at
of those
our
things.
discretion, we would redo
Right.
background checks. So that is a good question that brings up a new thing to think about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yes, no, you won't have to do a new form. But yes, that's a good marker probably for a new search. And so again, if anybody is here that's newly seeking to be approved that hasn't filled one out, we have one. Maybe come get it here at the end. I'll hand those back to you. All right, so any other questions about that form or the process? Or okay, did you give me the clicker back?
No.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We didn't practice. All right, supervision of children then. So page 6 in your manual. So the following policies and guidelines must be carefully followed in our church to reduce the risk of harm to children and to reduce the risk of false accusations against you, the approved workers. So main thing, 2 words to remember in all circumstances, accountability and visibility. So all church ministries and activities involving children and or teens are to be conducted in ways that promote accountability and visibility, not secrecy and isolation. In order to maintain this standard, the following guidelines must be followed. All right. So, as far as accountability, all ministries involving children and or teens are to be staffed according to a team structure. So this means that at minimum, 2 approved workers, and at least one of whom is an adult, so aged 18 and older, must be present during church ministries and activities. So our standard of operation is that if only 2 workers are present, they should not be related to each other, such as spouses, parent, child, or siblings. Again, exceptions may occur, but they must be pre-approved by a ministry staff member. So not just on the spot like, oh, whoops, it's just this. We would have to then account for that in a different way and find approved workers that would not be related in that scenario. So visibility. All ministries involving children or teens are to be conducted in a way that ensures visibility. Classrooms are equipped with windows for visual protection, so church staff, ministry supervisors, and the parents of children or teens in any church ministry have the right to observe the program at any time unannounced, but this does not allow them to have the right to disrupt or interfere with the ministry. So accountability and visibility. Keep those 2 words in mind with what you're doing, and that should be a good guide. So our guiding principle is a single child or teen should not be isolated with a single adult. So isolation, the key word there, occurs when no one else is aware of the situation and when there is no opportunity for others to observe the activity. So this doesn't mean that there can never be single child with a single adult, but not in an isolated form. So someone else should be aware, and then it should be in an environment where it can be observed. So some special circumstances to consider. First would be bathroom assistance. This is primarily, 2s, 3s, 4s, the younger kids' classrooms. So bathroom assistance consideration. So diapers and pull-ups, I guess this would be the nursery part, should only be changed in the designated areas and in the presence of other approved workers. So, and only women are permitted to change diapers and pull-ups. Although a worker may take a child alone to the bathroom, workers may not take a child alone into the bathroom. A worker may, though, enter the bathroom when absolutely necessary to assist a child, perhaps with they can't get their pants pulled up or something like that, but they must maintain an environment of visibility and accountability. So these circumstances should be very rare and should be considered with a lot of discretion and caution. Again, be above reproach in everything you're doing. Do not set up a scenario to invite suspicion in any way. Second special circumstance to consider is overnight stays. These don't happen often, but if they do, a parental permission slip is required for an overnight stay. This is going to mainly probably be student ministries events that might take place, but special attention should be given to any overnight lodging situation. They should be planned and performed in ways that promote accountability and visibility, not secrecy and isolation. Information regarding the activity, the personnel, and the logistics must be clearly communicated to the parents in advance of the activity. Rules and expectations for behavior must be clearly communicated to and consented to by all the participants of the activity. Travel. Workers should never ride alone in a vehicle with a child 5th grade or younger. So we do encourage same-sex mentoring, discipleship between adults and children 6th grade through 12th grade, which may involve time in a vehicle together. In such cases where an approved adult may be riding alone in a vehicle with a 6th through 12th grade student of the same sex, make sure the parents, the youth leader, or the pastor know the travel plans. So workers must never ride alone in a vehicle with a 6th through 12th grader of the opposite sex. So only of the same sex and make sure there is knowledge ahead of time by parent, ministry leader, and pastor. Student ministry discipleship. So this is similar to that, but all forms of one-on-one student ministry discipleship will be done by the volunteers who are of the same sex as the student. Small groups containing all males or all females will be led by a volunteer of the same sex. Groups containing both males and females may be led by a volunteer of either sex. So one-on-one discipleship things, not in a vehicle, same rules pertain as far as accountability, visibility, knowledge of parent, ministry leader, and the like. So the key here again is to not be isolated, not inviting suspicion in any way. Any questions at this point? Yes, Melissa.
For accountability, when it comes to teaching children, I know that sometimes spouses work together. Would that be an approved thing, or is that something we still have to go through the ministry if they're asking?
So that be if you were so the question was spouses working together in a classroom or a teaching scenario. If you're the only two, that would have to be approved ahead of time. Again, we would probably seek to avoid staffing in that way. We would make sure that there would at least be a third person. And then, a couple teaching together is great, but there should just be a third person, or it would have to be approved ahead of time. Yep. Daniel?
It's a silly question, but if I'm helping in nursery, can I change my son or daughter's diaper, or do I get to make my wife do it?
Well, you don't. Question was, if Daniel is working in the nursery with his own children, can he change the diapers of his own children, or does he get to make his wife do so? You don't get to make your wife, but the default would be, yes, even in that scenario, in that setting, as a ministry of our church, women are the one to change the diapers. If your wife is there with you, yes, she can, or you could maybe encourage one of the other female workers to give your wife a break as well, and they could change it. So, any other questions? Doug?
The scenario with the bathroom exception.
Yeah.
Like in children's church, frequently there's a teacher and a helper.
Yep.
And the helper will leave the room to escort the child to the bathroom, not going with them, but just make sure they're behaving in the hallway.
Yep.
For a brief period of time, that leaves the teacher alone with the children. Is that okay, or are we going to be modifying things to always avoid that?
Again, I think the ideal, and Joel, you can jump in, the ideal would be that there should be more than two staffed to be able to allow for those scenarios, so one worker could leave to monitor, stand in the hallway for a bathroom scenario, leaving two workers still in the class.
Yeah, but we do know that sometimes that doesn't happen, but at least then the staff that is in the room is in a room with a window in the door and with multiple children. We would definitely say you shouldn't be in that room with, like if you and Debbie are working and there are only two kids in there and Debbie leaves to take one to the bathroom, you should leave with both children. You should never be in the room with a child by yourself, and Debbie should never be in the room with a child by themselves. But in that situation where there are multiple children for a brief bathroom visit, at the new building too, there will be, the bathroom will be kind of right there, a single stall family bathroom or whatever. So it might be the kind of thing that you can open the door, watch them go down the hallway, and then just wait for them to come back. And like we had a situation in the nursery the other night where a child needed to go to the bathroom. There were 3 of us working. And the child was going to need help with their clothing. So what we did was a female took the child into the bathroom. I stood at the bathroom door with the door propped open so I could hear what was going on, and I could see into the room where the other worker was with the children. So, there was one worker in there was one worker in the bathroom, but there was still accountability for both places. So again, we're just always trying to think about accountability and visibility whenever possible.
Yep. And maybe this is another good time to make a promotion of, if you are because we care approved, which there are a lot of you here, be signing up when we say we need workers, so that way we can avoid such scenarios. There's always enough workers that we can maintain that environment. So, Judd?
That was a change that was made to the policy, on, a recommendation that was made to make that change. Just because if someone were seeking to harm children, working with a spouse to do that would not be, an unfamiliar thing. People often work together, or a spouse wouldn't report their spouse or whatever. So that, like, our best case scenario would be that those two people would not work alone together. But that has not, that's new policy.
Okay, yep. Any other questions? Evie?
So for 3s and 5s, there's 2 of us working, and if children have to use the bathroom, does somebody need to come with me? Because I have to currently cross the hall and to take children into the bathroom. So would Angela need to come and leave the other children, since there are workers in there also doing nursery, or how would that work?
And that was kind of that scenario that I described, where like as a nursery worker, then I stepped out into the hall so that I could still hear what was going on in the bathroom, but yet see into the nursery. So again, best practice is that you would not take a child into the bathroom by themselves. If they're 3 or 5 and they can go into the bathroom by themselves, and you just open the door, they open the door and go in, and you stand in the hallway waiting for them to come out, that's fine, because you're not in there with them.
Yep.
Angela stay with the kids, and then a nursery worker come out? Okay.
Yep. John?
Follow up to Jed's question then. So in the situation that a couple and a helper, one of the couple should go with the child to the bathroom, not the helper.
Yes, that would be the best thing. It's a question if there's a couple, a husband and a wife, and a third helper, and there's a bathroom scenario, have one of the married couple go to do that, to then not leave the spouses together in the supervision. Again, we're not overly concerned, but again, this is for your protection of false accusations, or, yeah, well, you're just covering for your spouse in this scenario, so you bet that would be the best practice to do. Other questions? These are good questions. Amy?
It says that only women are permitted to change the diapers and pull-ups. Does that include only women taking, say, like potty training son to the bathroom as well, who's needing help physically? How does that cross over?
So a question of, changing diapers and pull-ups, only women are allowed. What about a bathroom scenario where there's a pull-up being worn? That wouldn't be the designated area for changing a pull-up. So that's a little different than just assisting with the pull-up. So that would, it might be most ideal for a woman to be assisting in that scenario. Yes, if that's absolutely not able to be done, again, do so with accountability, with visibility, only in a rare circumstance, those sorts of things. But if you get in that bathroom scenario, realize a pull-up needs to be changed, come back to the designated area, and then follow the procedures for that. That answer the question? Maybe?
More so they're past the wedding stage, they just need help on the toilet.
Yep.
Like, so the fact that they wouldn't need change, they don't need anything, they just need help onto the toilet, they need help, all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it just be kind of the same scenario.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Joel, is there any examples that you have that could help with that? Or, again, probably...
No, but again, we're having women do any of that kind of toileting stuff. If at some point we have a young man with special needs and he has reached the point where he still needs help, but now we've crossed, I think on an individual basis, we could look at that and, okay, this, 10-year-old needs help. Maybe he'd be more comfortable with a man helping him, or, we would address on a case-by-case basis. But preschool-age children down, women are just taking care of it.
Judd, did you have a question again? Yes.
At the new church.
Yep. Yep. So the comment Judd just added was at our new facility, there will be a restroom within the nursery, and is it also the preschool room? But there is a bathroom within the nursery area, and so then some of these questions are not as pertinent to where we are currently. But all right, any other questions? All right, very good. All right, so let's keep going then. Still under supervision of children, proper and improper behavior. So we intend for our workers to be free in the use of appropriate forms of physical and verbal affection with young children, and for our children and teens to be protected from inappropriate attention. So in order to maintain this standard, the following guidelines must be followed. So as it regards, as it regards physical contact, the touching policy. So some forms of physical affection are generally appropriate for babies and toddlers, such as holding a baby, hugging a toddler, having a toddler sit on a worker's lap to read a book, or things like that. And it is important for a child's development. However, physical affection should always be in the presence of another worker. This behavior must never give the appearance of wrongdoing. So only touch a child in safe areas, such as arms, hands, the upper back. Holding and gently patting are comforting behaviors for small children. A pat on the back or a side hug can be comforting to older children, but massaging and rubbing should be avoided. Never touch a child on or near a region considered private, such as areas typically covered by a swimsuit, unless necessary when changing a diaper or helping in the restroom. Workers should avoid all inappropriate forms of physical contact with school-age children and teens. Church workers should also do their best to protect children under their supervision from inappropriate touching by others. Never touch a child out of anger or frustration. All contact must be irrefutably beyond the scope of suspicion, accusation, or even the appearance of wrongdoing. Discipline procedures. Proper discipline is necessary to ensure safety and to facilitate learning. However, no form of corporal punishment may ever be used. Corporal punishment is any punishment intended to cause physical pain. So proper discipline could include rewarding good behavior with verbal praise, reminding children of proper classroom behavior, redirecting children by separating those who are misbehaving, removing a child from the group using a timeout chair within the classroom, restraining a child from self-harm or from harming others, but only when necessary, or returning a child to their parent if steps 1 through 5, not necessarily steps, I guess, but other appropriate means are not changing the behavior. And then grooming behaviors. This is maybe a newer term or concept, but is very important for us to pay attention to. Grooming behaviors are behaviors that condition a child to accept physical or sexual contact by an adult predator. So such behaviors can take place in public, in secret, and online. While we do encourage volunteers to show interest in and affection for the youth in their care, we discourage adults from engaging in the following potentially grooming activities. So first could be giving gifts or giving an extraordinary amount of attention, praise, or affection to one child. Second could be maintaining a secret or a special relationship with a child, whether that be in person or via technology, social media, gaming, texting, and the like. So while communication may take place via social media, telephone, or other device, it should only be done on sanctioned platforms or in the presence of others whenever possible. So we have our Anchor, Facebook chat groups, we have Breeze, and those sorts of things that are kind of approved and sanctioned platforms for communication, so kind of limit it to those functions and don't create other avenues for communication that may not be noticed or tracked. And then third, do not encourage youth to give you gifts, money, or to do favors for you. Avoid those types of scenarios. Proper identification and dismissal. So supervision will be maintained before and after events until children are in the custody of their parents and guardians. In order to maintain this standard, the following guidelines must be followed. Nursery identification. So the nursery will maintain a process for clearly identifying each child individually as well as in connection to their parents or guardians. Dismissal procedures. Children second grade and under will not be dismissed from any class, activity, or function until they are picked up by a parent, an older sibling, aged 12 or older that has been designated, or another person appointed by their parent. So maybe a sidebar to this topic here are, I think maybe we've become a little looser in recent times with how our nursery and child rooms are operating. We want to be careful to not, in a sense, have lingering parents. When you bring your child to drop them off, there's other moms or the workers that are in there, and then you kind of want to talk to them and socialize and whatever. That's not helpful to the structure of the classroom, and so we would ask that, drop your kid off and leave. Even if there's some separation issues that can happen, if it lingers too long, the workers will come back. So try not to linger even as a parent there at a drop-off or at a pickup time. Pick up your kid and go. Other kids are waiting, and the longer you stick around, that can cause extra issues. Similar to that, non-related, so if you're not the parent or the approved person to pick up, don't be in the nursery area before service starts waiting to see all the cute babies coming, or as soon as service is done, go up there again to see all the cute babies before they get picked up. If you're not an approved worker and not a parent, stay out of the nursery and the classrooms. And then we would also encourage not utilizing our nursery rooms without the approved workers there. So don't bring your kids and say, well, I'll tell them to go play in the nursery until the workers get here. You either need to remain with them in the nursery till the approved workers get there, or they need to stay with you elsewhere or supervised in the foyer by somebody else you trust or designate. So we want to do our best to avoid these types of scenarios, especially as we get into our new facility. Hopefully there's more and new people coming, so we want to get a little more streamlined in these procedures of how we do those kinds of things.
Right, and I was just going to add, part of that is, right now, we all know each other, and we all know, and it's fine, whatever. But, when we're at the new building, we want to make sure that we are being the examples for the most dangerous person that comes into our building. If I let Amy just hang out in the nursery, well, then why can't Sally, who just came into our building, hang out in the nursery? If Addie and Evie and Lily are all down there, why can't the other 3 teen girls who just walked in off the street hang out in there too? So we want to make sure that we are being a good example to everybody. And, keeping in mind a person that might want to do harm to any of our children is going to look and see how we're behaving around them and think that that's okay. So if we don't let our children play unsupervised in a room and not know if an adult is walking in there, they won't be tempted to walk in there because the children won't be unsupervised. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's part of what we're thinking through. We just want to make sure that as we may have visitors come in who aren't, our anchor family who we all love and trust, that we are being a good example to the kind of behavior we expect from them and want to see from them.
Yep. And so, like I said, this might be a little bit of an adjustment as maybe we've gotten looser on some of these things. So just encourage one another. Check, hey, are you the assigned worker to be here? If not, remember, let's not be here, and just let's, work with each other and do these things the right way. And, I suppose if there's some sort of repeat offender that you've tried to engage with and they continue, it wouldn't be tattletaling, but you could come speak with, Joel, myself, pastor, and say this is kind of continue to happen, and we could give some gentle reminders or whatever as well. So we're all in this together for, again, our own protection, the protection of our children, and those sorts of things. So I'm going to skip the reporting section. I think I switched the order. Yeah, so known offender. A known offender on the property. If there is a person known to be an offender against children on the property, that person must be accompanied by a member of Anchor Baptist Church at all times. The security team will also be discreetly alerted to this scenario, and extra care to supervise the children's classrooms and restrooms will occur. So this supervision could be done. Perhaps there's a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, somebody you've been engaging with and inviting them to church, and they come, but you know something about their history. You could alert, again, myself, Joel, pastor, whoever, to the scenario, and perhaps you yourself then are just that escort wherever they are in the facility. You know, if there's somebody else that comes in, total random stranger, but we recognize them in some capacity again, then, you know, we would probably have, could be myself, could be one of our deacons, somebody from the security team that might escort them, and we would do so discreetly, and we would inform them what we are aware of and why we're doing this, but that we're not, discluding them or unwelcoming them in those kinds of scenarios. So that's how that might play out. So we want to make sure, again, to handle these scenarios rightly.
And again, I would just say, part of our thinking with that is, if someone is a known offender, and they are seeking forgiveness and seeking Christ, we want to welcome them. But if that is what they are seeking, then they should be fine with being escorted by somebody at all times. If somebody is going to push back against that, then we're going to question whether or not they're really repentant and our children are really safe. So, anybody can go online and do a sexual offender search by area. I did the small radius around the church, and there are 6 offenders within the neighborhood around our church of different levels of offenders. Again, we just want to be aware. And if we know of that, then we're going to take extra precautions. Somebody might come in and we don't know. We can't do what we don't know. But like I said, we want to be welcoming to people, and we're certainly not trying to, prevent someone from coming in and being loved and learning about Christ. But we want to make sure that they're doing it with the right motives and in the right spirit.
Yep. Medical emergencies. So in the case of a major medical emergency, yes. No, okay.
Will it be the responsibility of the nursery or caregivers to do the extra security? Will that be the security team?
So with that scenario, so if we know there's an offender in the property, they'll be escorted by someone. The security team will be made aware, and they will do the extra supervision of the classrooms, sweeping the hallways a few more times and, stopping in to check or checking in on the walkie-talkies, I guess, if those are still used, I'm not sure. So yes, the security team or others that can assist in that capacity. Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, I suppose if there's a known offender that is continuing to come and becoming a regular attender, and it's beneficial to always staff an extra person to help with that, that could be done, but the intention is that the security team is doing the extra supervising. Yep, very good. Okay, yeah, Ben. Yeah, I said I'll come back to the reporting of accidents. Yep. All right, so major medical emergency, please call 911 and then also alert the security team. Again, there's the walkie-talkies, or if you need to send someone running to the security team guy, go do that. Then ask that security personnel to contact someone on the medical response team and to wait at the door to guide the emergency responders to the proper area. And then remove the other children from the area if it is warranted and if possible. Now we'll go to the section I skipped, reporting accidents and incidents. Workers must report all accidents and behavioral incidents involving serious injury, including child-on-child incidents. So any injury that occurs at the hand of an adult volunteer, whether intentional or unintentional, any suspected inappropriate behavior by another volunteer, and any intentional injury caused by another child must be reported on an incident report form and given to the church office or appropriate ministry supervisor. Reports must be made within 24 hours of the incident. Minor injuries caused unintentionally by another child or due to the injured child's own actions can be reported using an ouch report. One copy of the ouch report will be given to the appropriate ministry supervisor or church office. A second copy or a verbal description of the event will be given to the parent. So examples of minor injuries might include, but not be limited to, small scrapes requiring a Band-Aid, a bump, or a bruise that occurred while playing. So Joelle, again, I think we've got the examples of the forms.
Right. So,
I guess I can click through them.
yep. So the classrooms will have a binder that looks like this in them. And in that binder, you are going to find incident report forms, which is up there. And like I said, this would be used if an injury was intentional. Either an adult intentionally hurt a child or another child intentionally hurt a child. It would be used if there was an accidental injury, but the injury was serious, more serious than just a bruise or a bump. It would also be used if there was damage to the property. If a kid, picked up a toy and flung it at the window and smashed out the window, you would fill out an incident report. You can see that, we're just asking for, who was involved, phone numbers, names of witnesses, so that we can kind of verify what happened, describe the incident, clicking yes, was anybody injured, what you did, all that kind of stuff. And this is a form that, when it's filled out, should be turned into the church office within 24 hours. And again, part of, even if an incident is unintentional or appears unintentional, we want to keep record of it, because too many unintentional incidents become suspicious. This next one is a copy of the ouch report. Obviously, it's much simpler, and you can turn that into either myself or Katie or the church office. You can give a second copy to the parent when they pick up the kid, or you can just verbally tell the parent, hey, this is what happened. Sophia was running and she tripped over her own feet and bumped her head, and I put ice on it. But we would still want a copy of this. yeah, that happened, yeah. We would still want a copy of this just because, again, if Sophia falls and bumps her head 3 Sundays in a row, we're going to start questioning if is there something in the nursery that we need to change? Is the nursery unsafe? Do we need to remove a toy? Do we need to change how we allow children to play or something like that? Wait, I grab my notes here. So, and again, you're filling out an incident report if a child is hurt at the hand of an adult, even if it's an accident, and even if it's relatively minor. I am holding Lucas, and I'm walking, and I trip over my own feet, and I fall, and he bumps his head. I still want you to fill out an incident report on that. And again, it's going to be one of those things. If I trip and fall with kids 3 times in 6 months, maybe I shouldn't be working in the nursery anymore. We just want to. We're not going to be able to ever see if there's a pattern if we don't document things when they happen. So, again, and the form should only take a few minutes to fill out unless it's a really serious incident, and then obviously we want it very well documented. The next slide then, we did talk a little bit about check-in procedures, and right now we really have no way of checking in a kid older than the nursery. If somebody comes with a visitor, they just go back to the class, and obviously that needs to change. This form is maybe just sort of a stopgap measure for right now. We are looking at updating our check-in procedures, and Breeze offers an option for that. There are other online options for checking kids in, and we may very well be going to something like that. But a few of these forms will be in that little binder as well. If we get a visitor before we have that in place, we're looking for just very basic information. One thing we would always want to ask is if there's anybody who's not allowed to pick up the child. Some of the examples that were given, especially if we start going back to a couple of services where we have Sunday school and then children's church, the people working when the child is picked up are not going to be the same person working when the child is dropped off. So, you may not know who brought the kid in. You want to make sure that you're giving them back to the right person. One of the examples that was given was, say, a non-custodial parent finds out, that my wife is taking my kid to Anchor Baptist Church. Well, I'm just going to show up and, hey, yep, that's my son. Yep, and, oh, is that your dad? Yep, okay, come with me. The kid would go with his dad, but if he's a non-custodial parent and shouldn't be there, if the mom has filled out this form and said, do not allow Joe Smith to pick up my child, before the kid goes with him, we're going to ask, oh, so what's your name? Oh, you're Joe Smith? I'm sorry. No. But so we're going to, and most people will probably be like, I don't know, like, what? Like, they're not going to have somebody who they would say definitely shouldn't pick up their kid, but we do want to ask that. And if we go to an online form of check-in and check-out, that field would be there as well for a parent to fill in. So, yeah. Any questions about that, about any of the forms or check-in, check-out kind of procedures? And again, like I said, this is all kind of very fluid right now. We may be doing things differently, but we do want to have some sort of something available even now, because right now, like I said, we have nothing. So,
Christine?
Yeah, I guess I would say that, and I would say that they need to give a phone number because we need to be able to contact them. And you can certainly tell them, I'm sorry, the question was, what if the parent doesn't want to give that information that's on the form? I would not let them leave the child without having the parent's name, phone number, and who can pick up the child. And then if there's any question about anything else, you can just call the parent and tell them it's snack time, but I don't know if Johnny can have this because you refuse to tell me if he has any food allergies. So would you let him have this snack or not? But yeah, I wouldn't take a child without the parent's name and phone number.
What about in the case of for discipline procedures, if a parent of a child wanted to address disobedience, like they had taken something from the child without asking, and they wanted to discipline it by slapping their child's hand, would they need to fill out an ouch form for that?
So the question is, what if a parent wants to use corporal punishment on their own child? And I think that we would ask you, if you are a worker at the time, we would ask you not to do that with your child in the classroom. If you, as a parent, want to deal with that in a different place, at a different time, that's your right. But we would ask you not to have any form of corporal punishment in the classroom with the children, even if it's your own child.
Yes. April?
Oh.
Say this form is mostly for like a first time
Yeah.
visit.
Yep.
Yep.
Members' children are reported somewhere already.
Right. This would just be somebody who is, visiting for the first time and coming into Kids for Truth. And maybe, and that's why part of it says guest of with a phone number. If you bring your neighborhood kid, go ahead and put mom's name down there, but then put your name down too and your phone number, because we're calling you in the building if there's a problem. We're not going to call mom and, if we need something happening right away. And then that form could just be kept in the binder if the kid comes back and they're not in Breeze or whatever.
So but when Breeze happens, will that be something that everyone does every week, or will that still be able to be done like once?
If we go into Breeze or some other form of online registration, it would be a simple matter of you're clicking that my child is here on an iPad, and then we have access to all that information. So you would only fill it out once. Yeah,
Okay.
no. John?
Going back to the medical emergency, it says someone on the medical response team. Is that a team that is in our church, or would that be people coming in?
Asking about the medical response team, we have had this in the past, and it is on my list of things to do to have a printed list for the security team, but it would be asking anchor members who have medical training so that if somebody had an accident, we might ask Laura Sturgis if she could come and sit with the kid until the EMTs got here or something like that, ask one of the nurses or medical personnel to come and chill.
Yep. Any other questions? All right, we'll try to keep moving. We had anticipated 45 minutes. We are over an hour. I apologize for that. So, but keep asking questions. Doesn't mean stop asking questions. All right, so to keep moving, suspicions of abuse or misconduct. So we need to be able to recognize the symptoms of abuse or molestation. Church workers and staff should be alert to the physical signs of abuse and molestation, as well as to behavioral and verbal signs that a victim may exhibit. Some of the more common signs are summarized below. May God forbid, of course, that any of this would happen here within any of our own families, but I think we should be careful to not be too presumptuous, that again, things could happen, and so this again is to protect yourself and to protect others by being informed. So there could be physical signs of abuse. These could include lacerations and bruises, especially in unusual patterns or that have the shape of another object, such as a belt buckle. Nightmares, that could be either a child reporting nightmares, or if it's a child that's actually taking a nap in the nursery area and they have fitful sleep or something that seems highly unusual. Irritation, pain, or injury in the genital area, difficulties with urination, discomfort when sitting, torn or bloody underclothing, consistent poor hygiene or inadequate clothing, or venereal disease. So these are potential signs. Not all of them mean for sure, but again, you're going to look for maybe consistency of things or multiple factors. Behavioral signs could be anxiety by the child when they approach the church or the nursery, or the opposite if they are afraid to go home. If the child seeks extra attention or is very affection-seeking from adults, or they are fearful or hyper-alert, multiple or inconsistent history for injury. So perhaps the child comes and you ask, hey, what happened? And they tell you a story, and then you hear another worker ask them, and they tell a different story, or week to week things change about the story. Or nervous or hostile behavior towards adults. Sexual self-awareness that seems out of line with their age and stage, the child acting out in sexual behaviors, or withdrawal from church activities and friends. So maybe a youth that was very engaged, and then all of a sudden they seem very disconnected and distant and pulling away. Or there could be verbal signs, child saying things like, I don't like, and naming a specific person. Indicating a person and saying that they do things to me when we're alone. A child might say, I don't like to be alone with this person, or using language similar to so-and-so fooled around with me, or other kinds of language that might indicate an issue. So, reporting of abuse or misconduct. So church volunteers, unlike a licensed school employee or coach, are not considered to be mandatory reporters by the state of Iowa. Clergy members as well are not considered to be mandatory reporters unless they are providing counseling services to a child, so formal counseling. However, we as Christians have a higher moral and ethical standard than even our state law creates. So acts or suspected acts of abuse, misconduct, or policy deviations must be brought to the attention of the appropriate ministry leader. No investigative or corrective measures can be initiated until a problem is appropriately reported. Do not wait for reasonable cause, rather report at reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion does not imply actual knowledge or certainty. Instead, it suggests that reasonable people have sufficient general knowledge of what appropriate and inappropriate interactions are, and so therefore to be suspicious about a particular incident. So that's from the book On Guard that you could reference. So the following requirements then are, these are the following requirements for reporting violations that are observed by all workers. So suspicions of parental abuse or molestation. So the worker observing suspected signs of abuse or molestation is to privately report the suspicions to the ministry leader or pastoral staff as soon as possible. Within 24 hours is what we ask. And then it must be documented about what was observed using the incident report form. A child making a declaration of abuse to a worker should be considered a suspected sign of abuse. Acts of misconduct by church workers. So if an overt act of abuse is witnessed, the witness then is to intervene immediately so that the action is not allowed to continue. If a witness sees a suspicious or questionable act, the witness should speak in a spirit of Christian love to the ministry worker concerning the observed behavior. Then the witness of such acts must complete and submit an incident report form to the ministry leader or pastoral staff as soon as possible, again within 24 hours. Policy deviations by church workers. So in a spirit of Christian love, again, the witness should speak with the ministry worker concerning the observed policy deviation. So the witness of such acts should verbally report the deviation to the ministry leader in a timely manner. So like I suggested before, trying to get back to some better safeguards with who's around the nursery. You know, in a spirit of Christian love, it's okay to report things and we can help one another. So the most important principle to remember is that to report incidents immediately and properly. The summary there you see is report to pastoral staff or ministry leader within 24 hours, carefully and in a private setting, filling out the appropriate forms. All right, so last page then, our response plan for allegations of abuse or misconduct by a church worker. So it will be the policy of Anchor Baptist Church to take all allegations of misconduct involving children and teens seriously. All complaints of misconduct will be investigated promptly, thoroughly, and as impartially as possible according to the following procedures. So plan, P, stands for prevent interaction. As soon as someone witnesses abuse or evidence of abuse by one of our church workers, the ministry leader and or pastoral staff member will use whatever action is deemed appropriate to prevent any more interaction between children and the accused worker. So this is to protect the child from further injury as well as the adult from any added accusation. So again, it may not actually be taking place, so it's protection for both the child and the worker. L of plan is for listen to the person making the report. The ministry leader and or pastoral staff member will listen to a preliminary report from those who reported the incident. The person who observed the activity in question will summarize the incident in writing on the incident report form, concentrating on factual descriptions of what was observed. So avoid interpretations as you write it out. Don't say, I think this is why they did it or what happened. So you may need to describe events as it appeared that this took place or things like that. But stick to the facts. Just say this took place, that took place, this took place, and then let the team, investigate those things afterwards. So be factual in your reporting. A of our plan is then assemble the response team. So if necessary, a response team will be assembled immediately or as soon as possible to address the allegation. So the purpose of this response team is not to determine if the abuse occurred, but instead to determine if the allegation of abuse should then be reported externally. The response team may include the following: the senior pastor, other pastoral staff members, appropriate ministry leaders, the church attorney, and or others that are deemed necessary by the senior pastor. All public communication is to be conducted by the senior pastor or any other spokesman designated by him. So this is important, so that if this is not you, you then are not the representative of Anchor Baptist Church to speak about what potentially took place or did take place. So even if somehow there was a big incident and the media is aware and someone comes to you or your friend hears about something, you're not our representative on these things. Don't speak on them as if you're an authority, even if somehow you are aware of all the details. Leave that up to pastor or whoever he designates to be our representative in these matters. And so then this also would relate to even just the level of gossip. So don't be speaking about things that took place or might have taken place or what you know. Let the proper people take care of those things. The response team may interview the following: the person registering the complaint, the accused individual, the person who allegedly experienced the misconduct, other workers present at the time of the incident, and any other persons deemed necessary, including the parents of those involved if it is involved with a minor. The response team will determine an appropriate response to the incident, which may include any of the following: exoneration and restoration. And of course, as we're talking about church workers, that's what we would hope for. Or policy refresher, just reminding you of the things we're going through tonight. A reprimand, perhaps a permanent dismissal from ministry to children, teens, or even all church ministries. You may experience formal church discipline or a referral to government agencies for legal action. The response team will take great care to protect the confidentiality of the alleged victim and the accused worker. It is possible or even likely that several people will be aware of the incident. Each should be cautioned to avoid gossip. The response team will prepare a report summarizing the incident, which will be kept on file in the church office. And then N of our plan is notify the proper authorities if necessary. So if necessary, a member of the response team will notify governing agencies. A report should be made when there is a reasonable suspicion that a child has suffered abuse. If it is determined that immediate protection of the child is necessary, law enforcement will also be contacted. All right, so that is the end of the policy. Any questions from that part? Yes, Kathy. Okay. Yep. Yes. Sure. So yeah, the comment or question is if you notice either witnessing a child harming themselves or you see evidence that they have been, yes, report that on an incident report form. Let the ministry leader and or pastor know, and then similar response could be made again. So that's, it's a suspected abuse, even abuse of yourself is still a form of abuse that would need to follow some of these procedures. Yep, good question. Other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for your attention. Again, apologize for it going longer than we anticipated, but I appreciate the interaction and all of that. So I will close in prayer, and then there is still the ministry or the worship ministries meeting.
There were sign-up sheets going around, make sure everybody signs them.
Did everybody get a chance to sign the clipboards that were going around so we know you were here? Anybody not?
We see you up in the video.
Okay, some up top. All right. So, all right, very good. And then again, if you are not yet approved and you have not filled out the form to volunteer, please come and grab one of those as well. So let me pray, and then Michael will hold the worship ministries meeting. Father, we are thankful again that we could be here gathered together as a church family and go through these matters, even though some of them might be tough to think about or discuss. But Lord, they are good things for us to be aware of, and we're grateful that you have given us your word that can lead us and guide us in how we would think about these things and how we would love one another, how we would love the children that you have placed in our care. I ask that you would bless us through the rest of this evening and into the week. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
And nomads who are not part of the worship team meeting, there is supper upstairs. If you're part of the worship team meeting, then just come up after.